to Blue. We talked about him a few weeks ago. You gave the audience a pretty good overview. What were your thoughts on his release yesterday?
It was an interesting press conference. I suppose it's always difficult to do these things on Zoom. So I think it was pretty straightforward. He released the cause of death as strangulation, and you'll note on his written press release it says manual strangulation (parentheses throttling). So it was not strangling with a rope or a tie or anything else, but by hand. Um, and then the second thing, of course, he said it's a homicide. Uh, and then as the questions from the press came in, they asked about the time of death, and they said 3 to 4 weeks before her body was found.
Yeah.
Okay, how did he determine that cause of death? And how did he determine that time of death? When we spoke last week, we talked about the likelihood that Gabby, having been out in the wild for 3 to 4 weeks, that animal activity, decomposition, and such would most likely result in skeletal remains being found. So, how did he determine, if that's the case, how did he determine the cause of death? And I think the hint here for us is when a reporter asked him, why did it take so long? He said, we had to consult, we brought in a forensic pathologist and a forensic anthropologist. So what do anthropologists do? They study bones, skeletal remains. In the case of strangulation, if you don't have a body where you could see finger marks, where you could see the hemorrhages in the strap muscles of the neck, what do you have? The hyoid bone. So the hyoid bone is a tiny U-shaped little bone, like two little horns and then a centerpiece. And it's right up here under the chin. It's a little free-floating bone, and muscles are attached to it to give them like a base to pull against each other. And it's useful in swallowing and in speech. When there's manual strangulation, and sometimes with a ligature as well, squeezing here pushes together those two little horns and the hyoid bone fractures. So it would, there you go. Perfect picture. Thank you.
I'm going to get this main one up right here.
So it would be likely that they had a forensic anthropologist there because we have skeletal remains, bones to examine. And how could he determine from skeletal remains strangulation? A fractured hyoid bone.
Now, let me ask you, not to cut you off because your thoughts and your information is so important to the audience. This whole U-shaped, it almost looks like a shoehorn.
Yeah.
What breaks exactly? Is it these side pieces, or is it here in the center? Is this cartilage here in the center, or is this bone on the left, bone on the right, and then these two little tooth eye bones?
Yeah. Well, we have the greater horns. Those are the two,
Right.
longer pieces sticking up, and then the lesser horns, and then the body, which is a more solid bone.
What actually breaks?
It would be the greater horn.
From the compression.
Sometimes you could get fractures of both horns. Sometimes with quite a bit of force, you could get a fracture of the body of the hyoid bone. But and I can't give you percentages, but they do exist of which fractures most easily. But what I've seen, in my experience, is just either of the greater horns fracturing.
How the body was identified. You see people talking about she was wearing a sweatshirt that was known to her family, and her family members identified. Well, we know that you don't identify a human remain by an article of clothing. And given the skeletal remains, as you said, there are several probabilities of how to identify this body. And could you just touch on that for the audience?
Sure. One of the simpler ways is forensic odontology. These are dentists who study the structure of the mouth and any dental work done, and they develop a profile from that, and then they compare it to the teeth of the deceased. So you have to go get, her parents would bring in Gabby's dental records, and they would be able to compare those x-rays of her dental records with x-rays they would do of the mandibles and the maxilla, and they would identify her by dental work and then confirm it with DNA.
Yes, and now for the DNA, they would have to contact the family again and ask them to bring in samples to extract her DNA to do a match, or they could take blood from the family members or ask for a toothbrush. Is that not correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Direct samples like toothbrushes, underwear, personal items are the best match. Otherwise, they would ask for blood samples or cheek swabs from both of her parents, and then compare those DNA profiles to get that.
How are they going to look at DNA or any type of, Ed, you talked about the familiar DNA and that they're a couple and they're engaging with each other. What goes on in an autopsy, perhaps, that they could look for a struggle, now that we know it was a strangulation, like cause of death, strangulation, manner of death, homicide? What would a good coroner look for to try to get some type of evidence? Were you always looking under the nails? Is it something more? Just give us an idea. You're the expert. We're not.
On the DNA question, even if there is no flesh left, which there's always something, but even if there were no flesh left at all, we can get DNA from bone matrix, and even from the pulp of a tooth. This is, as a result of 9/11, DNA technology advanced about 3 generations, unfortunately.
Wow. Yeah.
But in order to identify those very small bone fragments, those tiny little remains, our scientists developed incredible techniques for getting DNA from bone, tooth, and from very degraded samples of tissue. So it can be done, and the FBI can do it. So
how could Brian's DNA be identified on Gabby's remains? What about nail clippings if she scratched him while being assaulted? And I think I just brought that up moments ago to you. Can you talk just a tad bit about that, Barbara?
That's a good question. It is possible, not likely, but it is possible that there could be bits of his DNA under her fingernails. But out in the heat of the desert and 3 to 4 weeks, it's going to be degraded to the point of where it is pretty much unusable. I would be highly surprised if they were able to get any DNA of this Brian Landry. But there's that problem of, let's just say that they did find his DNA on her. Well, they were boyfriend and girlfriend. They were fiancés, supposedly. So, of course, you would find his DNA. Now, if a body were relatively fresh, of course, the first things we do, is Ed, we bag the hands right away, right? As soon as they get into the autopsy room, clip the nails, do scrapings in case there is flesh. And then we get DNA from that. If someone's being strangled, it is very, very likely that they would claw at their attacker,
right,
and would have flesh. But 3 to 4 weeks, time of death. A reporter asked, were any samples sent to an entomologist? What's an entomologist? A scientist who studies bugs. And he said, yes, they were sent to the FBI entomologist. Great. That gives us another huge clue here. If there were bugs, that means there's decomposition. And what entomologists do is they're expert in the life cycles of bugs. And so if they follow the life cycles of the insects found on her remains, they will be able to tell you within, days, not hours, certainly, but they could say 3 to 4 weeks. And that's how he would base his time of death on entomology. Ed, we've been at so many scenes where the common blowfly you find in New York, it lays its eggs as soon as the person's dead on the moist, open surfaces of the body, lays its eggs. A few days later, they become pupa, which crawl off and sort of develop and grow. And then they hatch into, I forgot the maggot stage.
Maggots,
Yeah, eggs turn into maggots, which feed, which become pupa, which crawl off. They look like little brown Rice Krispies, and then they hatch into flies again. That whole process takes almost 2 weeks. So entomologists would come in and say, oh, I have 2 sets of the pupa, meaning we've got 4 weeks, or I've got 1 set of pupa, and that means it's 2 weeks since death. So the entomologist at the FBI would be able to look at those generations of flies or cadaver worms or any of the bugs that are native to that area and give a rough time of death. So I think this all supports our initial inference that the remains were skeletal and decomposed. And he did say at one point, someone said, what was the condition of the remains? He said, I can't tell you that, but she was outside for 3 or 4 weeks. And I think that says everything.